and share with their customers, I don't think we would ever be obsolete. A good example of the importance of customer service is your mission statement. Hopefully many of you have mission statements for your library because they can help direct you in many of the things that you do. I'd like you to think about your mission statement, which may or may not reference customer service specifically in any way, and think about whether you would be able to achieve your mission statement without good customer service. And I think that you would find that it would be impossible. So we just covered something I think probably most of you already know, that it's important to give good customer service, but a lot of times the question is, so how do we do it? What's the first step we need to take to provide customer service? But the reality is that good customer service doesn't have, set steps or a script to follow. It would definitely be a lot easier if it was that way, but truly good customer service is evolving and flexible and understanding. Good customer service is a mindset that comes along with a service-minded heart. We could take Zappos, for example. They are an online shoe retailer that is lauded for their customer service. One thing Zappos is known for is their ability to provide good customer service without a script. Their employees aren't, necessarily given the right thing to say, but in every situation, but the skills they need to decide what is best for every situation. And so a service mindset is really required to be able to solve issues in that way. So just always be thinking about how to provide good customer service and have that be one of your priorities. So I live about 25 minutes away from my library, so anything I need to do after work means I'm getting home later and later in the day. I also have a 4-year-old, so I'm always in a hurry to get my errands done and get home. So I personally really value customer service that's quick and efficient. So I'm going to give you another chance to give some input, and if we could just stop for a minute, and if you could share in the chat, what do you value most when it comes to customer service personally? So I'm seeing people say knowledge, smile, friendly, speed, right? Being nice and not acting like it's a chore to help me, absolutely. Yeah, lots of smiles, politeness. Yeah, feeling welcome, yeah. Yes, listening to understand as opposed to assuming, and we'll talk about that too. Understanding my question. Positive, very good. So I'm seeing a lot of different answers here, and I think this is a great exercise because it gets you thinking about whether you're providing the things that you value most to your own customers. So I value quick and efficient, so I make sure that my staff and my circulation desks are staffed based on, what are our busiest times in the day, for example. And so that helps make our customers come in and get quick and efficient service. So that's kind of this is a rhetorical question you don't necessarily need to answer in chat, but whatever you've put in chat, is it true about your own library? Okay. So there isn't necessarily, a sequential list of steps that you have to take to provide good customer service, but there are lines of thinking that you're going to need. So one of them is attentiveness. So make sure you're listening to your patrons when they bring an issue to you. I think it's really easy to make assumptions about a situation and just kind of turn your ears off to what your customers are saying. Instead, it's better to listen and empathize with each situation in order to create a better understanding of what's truly going on. I believe good customer service involves hearing what is being said, but also what isn't being said. So it's important to pay attention to not only your patrons' words, but also their body language. I know a lot of people who aren't comfortable speaking aloud about a bad experience, but you can kind of tell they feel like a situation isn't being handled right by the way their bodies react. So crossing of arms, hurrying away, stiffness, those are all signs that the customer doesn't like how something's being handled. And so you probably know the saying, the squeakiest wheel gets the oil. Don't make patrons have to take on that mindset in order to receive good customer service from your library. I have a good example of this. A customer, comes in to return a really large stack of overdue books. And she comes to the circulation desk and tells the person working that because of a death in her family, her books are overdue and she needs to return them and pay the fine. And so a staff member would respond by telling the customer, they're sorry for her loss and that because of the circumstances, they'd like to waive the overdue fines. So in this example, the customer wasn't asking for the fines to be waived or, complaining that she shouldn't be charged overdue fines because of her circumstances. Instead, the staff member is listening to what the customer was sharing with them and then choosing to act on that underlying message. And I think the ability to pay attention to detail will lead to you, exceeding your customers' expectations. So my first year of doing this course, the customer service module came directly after the ethics module. And I had someone say, but wait, isn't that unethical? And, didn't I just learn that I should be treating everyone the exact same? And my response at that time would be yes, absolutely. If you're treating everyone with the same, flexibility and caring, then you are being ethical. So if you have a customer that, you really clash with and you seem to have a lot of conflict with, and that customer came in and said, my family member has passed away and my books are late, you would give them the same courtesy as you would if your very favorite and friendly customer came in and with the same story. So to me, that's ethical and treating everyone the same. So that kind of example leads me to this slide. To provide good customer service, you have to care. Most of us are in the profession of librarianship because we care about our communities and we care about the people in our communities. And so without a service-minded heart, customer service isn't going to come naturally to you. Libraries are different from businesses in the fact that we are oftentimes dealing with a population of people that live high-stress lives. And so it's important to keep that in mind when you have a customer, overreact to something that to you doesn't seem like a big deal, like, a 25-cent or a $1 overdue fine. They probably aren't this upset about just the overdue fine, but it's simply one more thing they're dealing with in their lives. So one of my favorite lessons I learned from a customer service training that I've taken is to remember that we are all whole people, and even when we're at work, we are whole living human beings, and we are serving other whole living human beings. And that's always stuck with me, especially during painful customer service interactions. And it really helps me remember that I am a human serving a human, and neither of us are perfect, and we are all doing the best we can with what we have. So really, no matter what kind of struggles you may be facing or your customer may be facing, we should care about the people that come into our buildings because that's what our profession calls us to do. Good customer service also requires some deal of trust between the library staff and your patrons. So I believe trust will create loyalty from your patrons because they're going to continue using your library because they know you always handle issues fairly and quickly. So now I'm going to say something that many of you will probably think is naive, but because trust is an important part of good customer service, I'm going to make, kind of an extreme statement. You must trust your patrons when they tell you they were in the hospital and couldn't return their books. You must trust them when they say they returned an item and it wasn't checked in from their account. You have to trust them really when they say, I was late because of this or this or this. I think giving them this benefit will really help, and I think your library is going to reap the reward of loyalty when you show them trust. People honestly don't remember, who made the mistake or what the mistake was. They remember how long it took to resolve it. And quickly resolving an issue requires you to trust your customers. So it's really not about being naive. It's about accepting, a certain amount of loss in order to instill the idea that your library is understanding and supportive of the people in your community. So I do want to include a disclaimer, though. You don't have to trust someone a second or a third time, use your best judgment, really. In the end, the goal isn't to be taken advantage of, it's to create loyalty. So you probably aren't going to create loyalty with someone who's, willing to lie to you. So give people the benefit of the doubt the first time, but you could do something like put a note on their account or, just explaining that a fee was waived because of a specific situation. And then you would be able to look back and see if there's any kind of pattern of abuse. Really, the main idea here is that you can't treat all situations the same, and every issue is unique and needs to be treated that way. So like I said in the beginning, there's really no scripts or blanket procedures to good customer service. It's just a mindset that will include some amount of trust. I think there also needs to be a certain amount of trust between your employees and you as their director. So I think Apple is a company that handles trust really well. They allow their employees like a discretionary amount of money per customer, and I think it's like $200 or something, to help them resolve issues quickly. So they're encouraged to use their best judgment when assessing situations and then determining what steps need to be taken to ensure customer loyalty and that customer has the best experience possible. So that's why, you hear stories of people going into Apple stores and coming out 30 minutes later with brand new phones that had a cracked screen when they went in, because the staff has been given the trust to make decisions like that. So inevitably, you're going to come across a patron that will try to take advantage of the benefit of the doubt that you've given them in the past. And we all wish people didn't act that way, but they do. So don't let them ruin it for the rest of your patrons, but know what you can do to help ease the conflict. So here's a short little video that talks about what you can do when you have to upload or uphold a policy. Give me 1 second. Now, there's like an alarm sound that goes off near the beginning of this video, so just be prepared for that.
Hi, this is Dan O'Connor bringing you Say This, Not That, our weekly communication series based on our book, Say This, Not That, power phrases to help you communicate with more power, tact, and finesse, as well as danger phrases to avoid at all costs. This week's danger phrase, our policy.
Danger phrases, power phrases, say this, not that. With your host, Dan O'Connor.
We've all heard people begin sentences with our policy, and we all know nothing good has ever come after it. There's a simple two-step process that you can use when you have to tell somebody about a policy and you know that the message is not one that they want to hear. And the two-step process is, step number 1, deliver the benefit statement first. Tell people what's in it for them. And you might be thinking there's nothing in it for them. It is your job as a savvy communicator to determine how this policy really benefits the person to whom you're explaining that policy. Step number 2 is to then actually state what the policy or rule is. And if you can do it without actually using the word policy, perfect. For example, say this. So we can ensure your security and protect your account, unfortunately, we do have to ask these questions at the beginning of every conversation. Not, sir, it's our policy to ask these questions every time. Or say this, so that we can help keep our energy prices low for you and our other customers, unfortunately, I can only extend the deadline once every 6 months. Not, no, I can't extend the deadline again because you've already had one extension in the past 6 months, and our policy clearly states only one extension per 6-month period. Or say this. To help protect you from serious health hazards such as the Ebola flesh-eating virus, we do insist that you wear shoes. Not, no shoes, no shirt, no service. And one last note, as a polished, practiced professional, you will find that once you deliver a message using a system such as the one you just learned, the two-step policy pattern, when people challenge you, as of course they will do when you tell them what the policy is, instead of engaging every single time, simply implement the broken record. You said it right the first time, just keep repeating exactly what you said every time, and the person to whom you're speaking will recognize that you are not a rube, that you are a polished, savvy professional, and you'll find that it is not only easier to deliver these difficult messages, but you'll find that it is more effective as well. So again, this week's lesson, the two-step policy pattern. Step number 1, give the benefit statement, give the WIFM, what's in it for me, to the customer. Tell them why the rule exists in the first place. Then, step number 2 is to actually deliver the rule or the policy. And if you can avoid it, don't say the word policy. So thanks for joining me. This is Dan O'Connor, and this has been Say This, Not That.
Okay. Get back. So I can think of quite a few ways that this can apply to a library. Maybe at your library you have someone who is taking advantage of your trust and is, repeatedly abusing the library's renewal policy. So if we follow the same type of concept as this video, you may say something like, I'm sorry, I see that we recently extended some due dates for you in order to provide the newest and most popular titles to you and our other customers. Then I can't extend the due date at this time. So, you've let them know that you're enforcing a rule, but in a more positive way and letting them know why. So trust is only a worthwhile cause if your library staff is willing to take responsibility and initiative. Good customer service to me means taking responsibility and initiative when problems arise. So first, to your patrons, everyone in your building is a librarian. When patrons walk in, most probably don't know or don't care, what your expertise is or what department you work in, or if you're in charge. It's important to know what's going on in your library and where things are so that anytime someone asks you a question, you're able to answer it. And so, if someone comes in and asks what time story time is, you shouldn't have to direct them anywhere. You should be able to answer it yourself. So just take the initiative and to know those answers. And then the same can be said when you're dealing with a customer complaint or an issue, whatever, take whatever extra step that you're able to take to right wrongs. So whether that's extending checkout periods or placing something on hold, you can also take the extra step when there isn't necessarily a problem, like, always offering to interlibrary loan a book that a patron is looking for, but that you don't have in your collection. Don't make people ask for that kind of service, just offer it first. It's another one of those, don't force them to be the squeaky wheel. And then having your whole staff take responsibility for your library is another important part of positive customer service. Everyone should be willing to engage in problem solving and working to better policies. So really be open to hearing from your staff about the library's policies. In some libraries, it's the people working the desk that are living with and enforcing policies that might have the best idea about what works. Then everyone in the building should take responsibility for the comfort of your patrons. So that means taking care of building issues when you see them, if it's in your ability. If anyone has ever been to a Disney park, you might have noticed, how really, really clean it is. And that's because everyone employed by Disney is expected to pick up trash. that they see in the park. So whether they're, a CEO or a costumed character or a repair person. And Disney's ability to just keep everyone involved in that kind of responsibility leads to a higher level of comfort for their customers. So I think at this point, some of you may be thinking about the number of examples that I used that were from, large profit-driven businesses. And it's true, libraries are not driven by profit, don't really make any profit. And we don't have huge budgets like Apple or Disney or, we're not businesses. And really, there's some dangers concerning treating libraries like they are businesses because we are truly different in so many ways. We can't be measured by the same metrics. We're usually stewards of public resources, and we serve a much wider range of people than a lot of businesses do. But I do think there are strategies that we can use to provide good customer service in ways that are similar to some of those businesses. Apple, Disney, and Zappos have all been praised for their customer service practices. And I think, it's pretty evident when you do a Google search for those companies' employees, you get pictures like what's on the screen, happy, friendly looking people. And so, hypothetically, is that the kind of picture that would come up if someone searched for a photo of your library staff? And I think there are things we can learn from businesses and their customer service experience that we may be able to replicate without spending a lot of money. Obviously, I know none of us have $200 per customer to keep them happy. So I think often it's really just small acts of kindness that can leave a lasting impression on people. And so that's why I think, being positive and respectful and nice can really take you far in terms of service without spending any money. So with that being said, are there any questions so far about what we just covered before we move on to our next topic?
While people are typing, if they are, that's one thing I can't tell if people are typing.
Yeah.
I have to contact Zoom about that. One of the things that really struck me about what you said was the ownership, taking ownership of the problem and giving your staff the authority to take ownership of problems and really be proactive about fixing things for patrons without having to check with you every time they do something. That's just wanted to double emphasize that because it's really a great way to make sure that your staff are providing customer service. So I haven't seen any questions come through. So
okay, so we'll move on. So I want to touch on one thing that maybe doesn't seem like it's a part of customer service or should be a part of customer service training, but that I think is really essential to, positive interactions. You have to take care of yourself. So I want to take a minute and have you share with all of us what kind of things you do to relax. And just type it in the chat. Someone said relax. Garden, reading, of course. Family and friends, yeah. Online games. Pets, it sounds like.
I have to say, Carolyn from McLouth is a woman after my own heart because killing pixelated things in games is actually very relaxing.
Yeah. So. Okay, so now that you've, shared what helps you relax, my advice is to do more of that thing. I think good customer service requires a certain amount of patience and caring and fortitude. And those are all things that become really difficult when you aren't giving yourself enough time to relax and just disengage from your work outside of the library. As directors, you probably have really busy and demanding lives, and it can be really difficult to take the time to take care of yourself. But I think it's almost impossible to serve others if you aren't also serving yourself. So our reactions to others can so often be influenced by how we're feeling personally. And when we're overworked and stressed, our tempers tend to be shorter, and our empathy and our compassion is lowered. So I won't go on about that because I think we could probably spend a whole hour talking about how it's important to take care of yourselves, but definitely keep it in mind. And some of the things we've talked about today are just so much easier to do when we aren't stressed ourselves. So now that we've talked about some of the key aspects of customer service, I think it's important for us to consider what your role is as the director of your library. Since we're all coming from different library types, you're all going to have varying experiences. But I think everyone can probably benefit from taking a look at what you can do to ensure your patrons are receiving good customer service. So one thing you can do as a director is consider, what kinds of small acts of kindness can I do for my patrons that don't cost money? So, a positive attitude doesn't cost money, listening and empathizing doesn't cost money, being flexible doesn't cost money. It's free to use positive language and just to interact with people in a positive way. So I've linked to a short article from Public Libraries Online about some ways that you can end customer service interactions on a positive note, even when you haven't been able to provide the customer with what they want. So it would be things like, I'm sorry, we don't process passports here, but I know the post office does. Would you like me to look up their phone number for you? So, and in the article, there are some more examples of small acts of kindness that your library can do to make you look more friendly and helpful. And then one good exercise to do after a particularly painful customer interaction is just to replay that interaction in your head and then ask yourself, what could I have done to make sure that interaction ended on a positive note? So even if you're feeling like there was absolutely nothing you could have done to turn it positive, even just stopping and considering it can help you evaluate the service that you're providing. And then as a director, you have the ability to create, a culture in your library. You set the tone for all the other interactions that are happening because your staff is going to take your lead on how to treat customers. And because of that, you really have to hold yourself and your staff to high customer service standards. This means, not faulting staff when they bend the rules for a customer, if the action resulted in better customer service. This kind of goes back to what we were discussing about trust, or that Robin mentioned. You have to trust your staff to make good decisions and be able to judge whether their decision led to better customer service. So Nordstrom's is another business that is often commended for its customer service. Robert Spector, you can see his book on here, titled The Nordstrom Way. And in it, he discusses how hiring can impact your customer service culture. He says, people always ask me, how do you teach core values? The answer is you don't. The goal is not to get people to share your core values. It's to get people who already share your core values. So it's important to be asking customer service questions when you're interviewing people, so you can get a feel for how they may better your culture of customer service, and sometimes that can be in unexpected ways. So hiring people with good customer service skills is important, but then you also need to continue to stress the importance of good customer service to all staff in your library, even after you've hired somebody. So one way to show that you value good customer service is by giving recognition when you see it happening. Let the staff member know that you appreciate the patience or the kindness they've shown to customers. Some people have the mindset like, why should I reward someone for doing their job? Or, isn't that part of what they're supposed to be doing anyways? And yes, but in order to create a workplace culture that really values good customer service, I think it's necessary to recognize, reward, and discuss it. So make sure you're calling attention to good customer service, not only to the staff member that performed it, but also to the rest of your staff. Hold customer service up as a value that is important to you, and that's going to raise your chances that your staff will value it too. And then another Nordstrom principle in Robert Spector's book is on product knowledge. And he says, product knowledge is power. Salespeople should know everything about the item because it gives them credibility with the customer. So really our product is our library, our collections, our programs, our role in the community, and we are the salespeople. So it's really good to have knowledge about all of those things, because how else will you serve your patrons and help them find what they need unless you have that knowledge? So we gain product knowledge, like Robert Spector talks about, by attending training, reading about trends and library literature, and most importantly, by talking to our customers. The same can be said about your staff. So allowing them to stay ahead of the curve by providing ongoing training and educational resources to them. So this could be as simple as printing out an article and leave it on the desk for reading and maybe discussing it. But really, if the opportunity arises to send your staff to outside training, I would always take the opportunity, because this is going to help them feel more confident and knowledgeable, and something that all of your regional systems offer, training on an ongoing basis. So knowing your product is a subtle way to let your patrons know you care about what they're looking for and that you've taken the time to learn about their needs. Another subtle but important factor in the impression that you're giving people who come into your library is the signage. So as the director, it's your responsibility to make sure your library is welcoming and inviting. And one way a lot of libraries tend to give out that opposite message is through signage. Are all your signs telling your customers what not to do? And is there friendlier language that you can be using to relay the same rules? So there's a link in here to an article in Library Journal about positive signs. And one of the examples in the article, the author visits a library and they have a sign in the children's room that says, parents, please use only one toy at a time for play in the library. Always return items to the correct bag. And so then the next time he visits the library, the sign has been replaced with a sign that reads, help the librarian. If you clean up toys, come to the children's desk for a special prize. And he talks about what a positive tone difference that was. And, the truth is you're going to have people who don't clean up after themselves, no matter what sign you have up. So why not put up a sign that speaks to your library's good attitude and family friendliness? And, that special prize could be, stickers that you got free out of a book. It doesn't have to be anything special. So one thing I would suggest is that you occasionally enter your library from the front door instead of the back, because that's where your patrons are entering. And then you'd be able to do an audit of what signs they see and what kind of messages that you're sending to your customers as they come in. So as a director, you should always be continually reviewing your policies. I came across this newspaper article last January and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to include this in my customer service course because it's such a perfect example of customer service gone wrong. This article is about Jonathan Kolb, and you'll see him there on your screen standing there all angry in front of his public library sign. And Jonathan went to check out at the library, and he was told he had an $8.70 fine for like a baby name book that he had checked out, and he thought he remembered that he returned it. But he went ahead and paid the fee, and then he went home and looked for the book. And then, long story short, he found the book. It had been, or he didn't find the book. The book had been returned to the library. They found it on their shelf. It just didn't get checked in. That happens to all of us. It was a mistake on the library's part. It's an inconvenience to the patron, but none of us are perfect, and it happens sometimes. So he went back to the library the same day, and he asked for a refund of his $8.70 for the book that he did return on time. And the library told him, no, it's against our policy to issue refunds. He could have a credit on his account, but he could not have the money that he had just paid back. So when Jonathan asked, why can't I have a refund since the library made the mistake, he was told because of the library's accounting practices, they did not give refunds. And that was just their policy. And as most of you can probably agree at this point, this policy and its enforcement is obviously not working because we see this picture of Jonathan from his local newspaper. And in this case, there is such thing as bad publicity. That you do not want to be this library. So when reviewing your policies, just ask yourself the reasoning behind them. Do they not offer refunds because they may not have enough cash on hand to give them out? Or, then have a policy that says refunds over $25 have to be issued by check or something. This policy was probably written for one bad apple, and now it's being used to make other people angry. So just reviewing your policies on a regular basis is an important part of customer service. And then one good way to review your policies before a problem like that arises is to start a no list. This is something we do at my library now. We just keep a list at the front desk, and every time you or your staff have to tell a customer no, just make a note of what you said no to. So throughout the year, just review the list and ask yourself if there needs to be changes in your policies. So not every no needs to be changed, but it gives you something concrete and something to help you consider what you need to review. And then ask yourself, are our policies creating unnecessary barriers? There's at the library I work at now, they employed this tactic, and on their no list constantly was, no, you can't get that child a card because you're not their guardian. And so they decided to review that policy because the intention of it was that the guardian was responsible for taking financial responsibility for any lost material or overdue fines. And the way the policy was written meant grandma or grandpa couldn't get a card for the child they brought in, and that was just a reoccurring no on the list. And so kids were going home empty-handed because their mom worked the night shift and was never able to bring them physically into the library. And so the library solution for that was to create an application that required any person under the age of 18 to have an adult who would be willing to take responsibility for any lost material, but it didn't necessarily need to be their guardian. So they were able to stay true to the original intention of the rule, but without unnecessarily limiting access to material. So another disclaimer, I had a director who took this course the first year I did it, and they came to me and said, I said yes in this particular situation when maybe I should have said no. And she said yes because she thought maybe that I was suggesting that no was bad And I just want to reiterate, not every no is bad, but just a chance to reevaluate and reassess what you have going on in your policies and how you're approaching situations. And this is something that your regional system consultants can talk through with you. And it's definitely what they're there for. So if you are questioning whether your no is a good idea, then just talk with them. Or me. Feel free to contact me and we could talk it through. So the last part of your role as a director that I'm going to discuss is your ability to create an atmosphere that values your patrons' privacy. We should be providing good customer service to customers who check out material that we don't necessarily like or agree with. According to ALA, and I have this on our slide, confidentiality, privacy, and intellectual freedom are crucial elements in providing quality public library service. So it's not up to us to decide, what is okay to comment on and what to keep private, and what someone reads should be kept private regardless. So I think sometimes our customers they feel judged by library staff because of the subject matter of what they're checking out, and they shouldn't have to feel that way. I think it's really easy to make assumptions about what we think a person would or would not like when they're checking out a book. But unless they've engaged us in, a discussion about what they're reading, I think it's best for privacy's sake to not comment on material that people are checking out. And we really need to reconsider saying things like, I think this book might be too racy for you, or, did you know this book has a lot of curse words in it? And we've got to control our facial expressions. A patron should be able to check out whatever they like without feeling like the librarian is judging them. So this can be really difficult when we feel like we know a customer on a personal level. But when you are at work as a librarian, you have to put that feeling aside and give everyone the same amount of privacy regardless of how well that you know them. So most customer service training will teach you, how to give good customer service to the general population, and most of it's pretty common sense stuff, like a lot of the things we've talked about today. Paying attention to body language, listening. But there are populations of people that are better served in slightly different ways. So I did want to talk just for a minute about, how I think everyone deserves good customer service, regardless of who they are. And there are some things you can include in your customer service mindset that might make people feel more comfortable in your library. So the first group is children and teens. We deal with different types of behavior from teens and children, so you might need to deliver service to them in a different way. There's really no way around it. Children and teens are louder than most adults, and that can cause some problems, and it may not be conducive to your library setting. In an ideal situation, you'd be able to separate the noise somehow. Maybe a quiet area for patrons who still want their library to be this quiet place. But I know in a lot of libraries that's just not possible. There are definitely, though, positive ways you can address loud yelling or chaos from children or teens. I linked to an article from School Library Journal that discusses, what customer service to teens should look like. And one thing she specifically mentions is being consistent. So when you're dealing with disruptive noise, maybe all staff should agree on, what level of noise is okay and what level of noise is not, and then agree together on a strategy to approach teens or children who are being too loud. So that way, younger customers will know what is expected of them and that they're going to get the same reaction from, staff member A on Monday as they're going to get from staff member B on Friday. And I think that type of consistency gives them, a level of comfort. And then there's other concepts discussed in this article, and I think that it's good to talk with your staff about dealing with teens and children, because sometimes you might have someone who just isn't comfortable with teens, or maybe I've heard someone say, I just don't really like children, and that's fine, but giving them tips for how they might make the interactions more positive could be helpful.
It looks like you've hit a spot. We've got a couple of comments here from folks who have that issue where they're so small there is no way to do a quiet area, and so there's a little bit of discussion in the chat about that. So.
Right, and one way I approach it is, we welcome everyone. And some people, kids don't have the ability to be quiet all the time. They're not, their brains aren't developed enough to have that kind of impulse control. And just because they're loud doesn't mean we shouldn't have them come in or discourage them, or parents from bringing them in. And Kim made a comment, there's times of the day when maybe there are less children in your library, and you could tell them maybe that's when they want to come in. And yeah, during the summer. I think it's just it's a balance, and, working with the kids to make sure they're not too loud, and then working with the adults to let them know that you welcome everyone regardless of their age, and seeing what you can do to compromise and work it out. And then just remembering what's age appropriate. Again, a 2-year-old is not going to stay quiet, regardless of how many rules you have or how many times you tell them to. They just don't have that ability. I'll just say more chat. Oh yeah, Kim. I also think it's important to assess how to best serve customers with disabilities. So a lot of libraries have created programs and training to better serve people who have been diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And there's a site on here with a lot of good information about how libraries can serve this population. I just wanted to share a video with you because it gives a lot of good tips. We won't watch the entire video. Maybe if I can get it to come up. We're just going to watch a few minutes of it.
With autism.
Understanding impaired social behaviors is a good first step. Some common social behaviors of people with autism include lack of awareness of others and difficulty socializing.
I don't want to answer questions.
Well, you know what?
They may seem distant or lack eye contact and sometimes have inappropriate emotional responses. Let's concentrate on how we can best offer excellent customer service to people with autism and their families in the library setting. As you listen to these tips, you may find yourself thinking how universal these strategies can be when dealing with any library patron.
I think a library staff person who's working at the front desk should initially treat everybody exactly the same, without any preconceived notions. Somebody walks up to their desk, if I was behind the desk, I would wait and see how the individual approaches me and tries to communicate with me.
As with any patron, greet people with a receptive smile and personal words of welcome. Address them by using their name first.
So Ben, we can now check these out to you.
Most of us would agree that saying the name first to make sure that you get someone's attention, and then making a simple, direct request is your best chance at having the individual with autism understand what you're asking or telling them.
Help the individual focus by talking directly, simply, and slowly. Whether or not the individual makes eye contact or responds, you will have helped them feel at ease in your library. To help figure out what their interests are, avoid broad, open-ended questions.
You might ask a question that's close-ended. Oh, do you like books about animals? So then you could say yes, no. You don't have to really process it or come up with a lengthy answer.
Enough?
I think that might be it.
Repeating may be necessary, but increasing the volume of your speech will not help them understand you. It may, in fact, be disturbing to the individual's senses. A person's response, or lack of response, will give you a first indication of their level of understanding and method of communication.
Most individuals with autism.
Okay. So I think it's really important that libraries are inclusive to all people, and sometimes that includes providing people good service in differing ways, depending on what they need. So there's a lot of times that you might need more knowledge about how to better serve people from different walks of life. So I wanted to leave you with this. I always struggle with whether I should share it or not because I don't know where it came from and I can't give credit to whoever wrote it. But another librarian shared this with me 2 years ago, and they found it, well, they think they found it in the library journal, but they're not sure. And they tape it to their door so that every time they leave their office, they're reminded of it. And I think it's just a really powerful reminder about how we should treat the people who come into our library. And so it's just a patron service philosophy. Every patron who uses our library should feel welcomed, valued, and respected. All our rules are applied humanely, courteously, and fairly to all. Every day is a new beginning, except in rare cases we should not presume that the problem will occur because of past experience. Every patron is entitled to their individual style of use of the library. Not all behaviors are problem behaviors, and action should be taken in a calm, reasonable fashion only after obtaining sufficient evidence that a problem really exists. So if you know the source of this or ever come across it, let me know, because I'd really appreciate that. So is there anyone with any questions or something you want to discuss? You're welcome to ask them now, or if you want to ask them separately at a later time after you've had some time to process, feel free to email me. My email address is at the bottom of the screen.
I don't see anything coming through yet, so.
Great. Okay, well, I'll just share with you what our homework is. It's just a discussion board asking you to talk about some of the good customer service you've received out of business, and then why you consider it good customer service and what you could do to recreate that experience in your library. So that's all we'll need to do this month.
And there's a question that came through while you were talking about the homework. What if a child is misbehaving, refuses to leave when asked?
I think it probably depends on what they're doing to misbehave. And of course you have, the right to ask someone to leave, but it would need to be, in my opinion, something serious. And I don't know if that child has a parent who comes in or what, but that's a difficult one.
We, and this is older children maybe, but in the library I worked at before, we would send letters to the parents to the home that was on the child's library card number or library card account, so that just to inform the parents that there has been an issue and the child has been asked to leave. And so a lot of, for teenager, maybe tweens,
Mm-hmm.
that can be, pulling the parents in can be a good, get a good result.
Right. And yeah, and it's also important to consider privacy
Mm-hmm.
in those kinds of situations also. And yes, and I hope everyone has, an unaccompanied minor policy where it says that kids under a certain age shouldn't be in your library without an adult. So maybe that would kind of help address that issue. Yeah, good, very good. Any other questions?
Some comments about people who've sent letters and called the cops. That when you do that, that word does start to get around. So yeah, just some comments. It looks like. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times redirecting is a good idea. So I have a group of boys who comes in at least once a week, and they always want to get on the computer together, and there'll be 5 of them on one computer, and they just can't control themselves, and they can't keep their voices down. And so usually I'll say, whoever has the library card is welcome to continue using this computer, but I need the rest of you to go find something else to do. And usually those kinds of conversations result in them leaving because they don't necessarily have anything else to do in the library besides be all at the same computer. And then maybe redirect, maybe there's a way to involve the child who keeps misbehaving in some kind of project. I think so many times our instant reaction is to punish, and maybe there's some other ways to engage kids who are having trouble controlling themselves. Yeah, games and puzzles, yep. Okay.
Right. Well, thank you, Savannah. This was excellent as usual. Lots of stuff for us to consider. Don't forget to pop into the Moodle classroom to do your homework this month, as shown on the slide on the screen. I'm not sure if it was Anna's computer or what, but she was having problems with some of the links. So I pulled the links out of the PowerPoint, and they are in the class as well. So if you don't have PowerPoint or are having problems in some way with the PowerPoint, you can see the links that she talked about on the Moodle classroom. They are there. So, all right. Well, thank you again, Savannah. Thanks everybody else for being so responsive, and we will actually not see you next month. Next month is no webinar month, and then we're done. So I think this is our last time to be together. So
Yay!
Yay.
Congratulations, everybody.
There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
Clarify, there is a module next month, just not a
Yes.
webinar. So,
right. There is.
Be sure to visit Moodle, and I'll be in touch. I'm coordinating the module on ethics.
There is still homework next month, just no webinar. So the light at the end of the tunnel is still a bit off, but it's visible now. So all right. Well, thank you all, and we will see you at your board meetings. At least Neckles, that's what we do. So
Thanks, guys. Bye.
all right. Thanks. Bye bye.